Okay, so I'm going to start with the welcome. My name is Margaret Bile, President of the Federated Women's Institutes of Canada, and it is my great pleasure on behalf of the Board of Directors to welcome you to this special roundtable event. This year, Women's Institute members from across our nation are celebrating 125 years of WI. And as you know, International Women's Day is recognized by the United Nations and is celebrated annually on March the 8th to commemorate the cultural, political, and socioeconomic achievements of women. FWIC WI Canada is hosting this roundtable discussion on food security and food waste today in acknowledgement of International Women's Day with special attention to the UN Sustainable Goal 12. We will begin our program today with the land acknowledgement recited by FWIC President-elect Lynn McLean, followed by O Canada and an introduction of our guest speaker. Lynn, if you are able to.
Sure. Thank you, Margaret. Before we begin this evening's program, we would like to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today. While we meet tonight on a virtual platform, we would like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands and to give gratitude for the sharing of these lands, which we each call home. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call this land home. So let's share the screen. We've gone through this, we've done this. We will now have O Canada.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to ask Lynn if you could mute everybody, please. Thank you. So, celebrating International Women's Day and in consideration of COVID-19 and the devastating effects that
You have to unmute. You have to unmute.
I guess I should start all over again. Sorry about that. All righty. So celebrating International Women's Day and in consideration of COVID-19 and the devastating effects that climate change continues to produce, the evolving topography of our rural communities and the efficacy of the agri-food industry, our board suggested that this topic be broached from a woman's point of view. The Honorable Marie-Claude Bibeau, Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food, was unfortunately otherwise engaged and sends her regrets. We have We are, however, delighted to have Mrs. Carla St. Croix as our guest speaker this evening. A little bit about Ms. St. Croix. With a career in the public service spanning over 25 years, Carla St. Croix was appointed to the position of Executive Director, Strategic Integration and Competitiveness Policy, Strategic Policy Branch, Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada in March 2019. In this capacity, Carla is responsible for overall strategic integration functions, including providing direction and leadership pertaining to agriculture, agri-food, Canada intergovernmental affairs, directing medium-term analysis and providing strategic advice and recommendations related to future agricultural policy frameworks, including analysis of business risk management in supporting the needs of the agriculture and agri-food sector. Additionally, she provides support and advice in the preparing and department minister in carrying out cabinet responsibilities and works to ensure coordination and the advancement of policy perspectives across all dimensions of agriculture and agri-food Canada's mandate responsibilities. Prior to being appointed to this position, Carla occupied the position of Director, Innovation and Growth Policy, Strategy Policy Branch, where since March 2015, she designed, developed, and delivered strategic advice related to innovation across the agriculture sector, and provided authoritative advice concerning these policies and their impacts to the Deputy Minister and the senior executives of AAFC. Since July 2014, Carla occupied the position of Chief Bioeconomy Policy within the Innovation and Growth Policy Division, and prior to that, Carla was the Senior Advisor to the Director General of Cross-Sectoral and Strategic Direction, Science and Technology Branch. Carla holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in Political Science from Braden University, as well as the Master of Arts degree in Political Science from Carleton University. What a tremendous asset we have in having you here with us today. So please welcome Mrs. Carla St. Croix.
Hi there. Hopefully you can hear and see me. Awesome. I'm joining you from my downstairs guest bedroom, given we're still in a pandemic. But I just wanted to thank you so much for inviting me on the eve of International Women's Day to discuss Canada's contribution to the UN Sustainable Development Goal 12. And I will do that through a bit of an agricultural lens, given where I am located. Maybe before I start, just on a personal note, the Women's Institute was very familiar to me as a young woman. I still like to think I'm young, but I was definitely younger at one point, and was very much part of my life growing up in rural Manitoba. So I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to talk with you today. So from an agricultural perspective, Canada has advanced Sustainable Development Goal 12 largely through our Food Policy for Canada, which was launched in June 2019. The Food Policy for Canada has as its vision that all people in Canada are able to access a sufficient amount of safe, nutritious, and culturally diverse food, and that Canada's food system is resilient and innovative, sustains our environment, and supports our economy. And that food policy also includes investments in priority action areas to support this vision. And specifically, really related to some of the topics you wanted to focus in on tonight. So food loss and waste. So for example, within that food policy, there's a $20 million food waste reduction challenge, which was launched by Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada in November of 2020. This food policy also includes a $60 million local food infrastructure fund, which I'll highlight a little bit later. So just to start with that food waste reduction challenge, it offers prize funding for innovators that deliver novel solutions to reduce food waste across the supply chain. According to estimates, and probably no need to tell you this, but more than half of Canada's food supply is wasted annually, and nearly 50 billion of that wasted food is avoidable. So that food waste reduction challenge is aiming to accelerate the implementation of innovative and concrete actions to reduce food waste in the food processing, grocery retail, and food service sectors. We're seeing a really strong uptake for this program, with the first round of the challenge attracting 343 applications from innovators across Canada and around the world, and the second round attracting 238 applications. At this time, I'm not able to say what final projects will ultimately receive funding and be implemented. However, Canadians have demonstrated that they are eager and full of ideas for tackling this pervasive issue. The other food policy initiative that I mentioned is the Local Food Infrastructure Fund. This program supports community-based initiatives that increase access to food and provide social, health, environmental, and economic benefits in communities across Canada, such as community gardens or equipment to store and distribute food. In response to the COVID-19 pandemic and the significant food system challenges it caused, the Government of Canada built on these programs and initiated additional programs designed to support the agriculture and food system and ensure Canadians could access nutritious food. For example, the Government of Canada provided $50 million in funding through a surplus food rescue program to address the urgent COVID-19 related surplus of food that could not otherwise be routed through the supply chain due to disruptions, such as the closure of restaurants. So this food was redirected to organizations addressing food insecurity, another critical topic that you're addressing this evening. The Government of Canada also provided $330 million in the Emergency Food Security Fund to support food assistance organizations like Food Banks Canada, Salvation Army, and others to help improve access to food for people experiencing food insecurity in Canada due to the COVID-19 pandemic. There is no question that COVID-19 has had a substantially greater impact on women, with many calling the economic effects of the pandemic a she-cession. Women remain underrepresented in the agriculture and agri-food sector. In 2016, 28.7% of all farm operators were women, and 7% of farms were operated by women-only operators. In addition to existing challenges, economic impacts of the pandemic affected women at a higher rate than men, as women were more likely to work in the industries that were most impacted by health restrictions, for example, food services and accommodations, and were more likely to stay home with their families. To help address this, the Government of Canada recognizes that a robust, inclusive, and feminist recovery is needed. Canada has created a task force on women in the economy to advance greater equity and address systemic barriers and inequities faced by women. There are also a number of Government of Canada initiatives, such as agridiversity and the Women Entrepreneurship Strategy, that continue to support women and other underrepresented groups in the sector. For example, Farm Credit Canada's Women Entrepreneur Program is giving women in the agriculture and food sector easier and more equitable access to financing. In just 2 years, the program has already helped more than 2,500 women. Going forward, our government will continue to prioritize work to address food insecurity and food waste. In fact, important commitments were identified in Minister Bibeau's, my Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Foods mandate letter, including to develop a national school food policy and work towards a national school nutritious meal program, and the creation of a no waste food fund to supplement and further the progress generated by the food waste reduction challenge I mentioned earlier. We also have important work underway to develop the next policy framework. Currently, the Canadian Agricultural Partnership, which is a $3 billion 5-year investment by federal, provincial, territorial governments, is also continuing to strengthen and grow Canada's agriculture and agri-food sector. As we work towards the development of the next agricultural policy framework, federal, provincial, territorial ministers of agriculture have agreed to a policy statement. It's called the Guelph Statement, and it was released in November of 2021 and establishes a joint vision for Canada. The vision is for Canada to be recognized as a world leader in sustainable agriculture and agri-food production in order to rise to the climate change challenge, to expand new markets in trade, and to sustainably feed Canadians and a growing global population. Important guiding principles for that next framework are to lead on ensuring a sustainable agriculture and agri-food sector by addressing climate risks and creating conditions for industry to succeed and compete globally, and to work to address barriers to participation and consider the needs of underrepresented groups such as youth and women, and strengthen relationships with Indigenous peoples to better support sector participation. As you can see, sustainable agriculture and addressing challenges of food security and food waste are very much priorities of the Government of Canada. In the coming months, we will be holding public consultations on a draft document that outlines key priorities and commitments for Canada to support sustainable food systems, including commitments related to improving food security and reducing food loss and waste. Thank you again for giving me an opportunity to present some of the work we're doing, including to advance the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 12, and I really look forward to the discussion of this table.
Thank you, Carla. And I want to thank you for taking the time, your time, to represent the Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada here. And if you do have the time and are willing to stay on, you are most welcome, and we do appreciate that. At this point, I'm going to turn the floor over to our MC for the rest of the program, Mrs. Brenda DeVald, who is the BCWI President and Chair of this committee. So thank you again.
Thank you, Margaret. Hello, everyone. It's great to be here today. My hope today is that by sharing information, we can all become more educated about food security and food waste, and realize how our actions, no matter how small, can generate positive change. We as WI members can then take this information back to our branches to help facilitate change in Canada. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, adopted by all United Nations member states in 2015, provides a shared blueprint for peace and prosperity for people and the planet now and into the future. At its heart are the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which are an urgent call for action by all countries developed and developing in a global partnership. They recognize that by ending poverty and other deprivations must go hand in hand with strategies that improve health and education, reduce inequality, spur economic growth, all while tackling climate change and working to preserve our oceans and forests. The hope was that these goals will be implemented by 2030, which is only 8 years away. So I think there's a lot of work to do yet to get there. Today, we are discussing the Sustainable Development Goal number 12, which is to ensure sustainable consumption and production patterns. What does this goal want us to think about? And why are sustainable consumption and production patterns important? We need to think twice about the things we use and buy, the waste we create, and how it impacts our planet and our lives. Everything we waste or throw away goes somewhere. Nothing just disappears. So we should learn to be more conscious of our spending and waste habits. that changing our behavior towards more sustainable actions makes a difference. Before we buy something, we could maybe be asking ourselves, do we really need this? Can I buy it secondhand? What company am I buying it from? Are they a sustainable company with a proven record of environmental protection? We need to realize there are many little things that we can do to achieve this goal. Awareness is the key, and every little action counts to improve the quality of life for all people everywhere on the planet. Achieving sustainable consumption and production patterns ensures that human activities remain within the carrying capacity of our planet while respecting the rights of future generations. The UN goals for sustainable goal number 12 are, by 2030, to halve per capita food waste at the retail and consumer levels and reduce food losses along production and supply chains, including post-harvest and losses. By 2030, substantially reduce waste generation through prevention, reduction, recycling, and reuse. To encourage companies, especially large and transnational companies, to adopt sustainable practices and to integrate sustainability information into their reporting cycle. By 2023, to ensure that people everywhere have the relevant information and awareness for sustainable development and lifestyles in harmony with nature. Today in our presentation, we're focusing on food waste and how it impacts us all. So what is food waste? And how is it part of security? Food waste refers to food that completes the food supply chain up to a final product of good quality and then is fit for human consumption, but still doesn't get consumed because it is discarded, whether or not after it's left to spoil or expire. Simply put, it is any food that is thrown away when it is still perfectly edible, which leads to the need to produce more food, which in turn leads to land degradation, declining soil fertility, unsustainable water use, overfishing, and marine environment degradation. These factors are all lessening the ability of the natural resource base to supply food. About 1/3 of the world's food is thrown away. What is food security? Food security means availability, accessibility, and affordability of food to all the citizens of the country at all times. It also means that all people at all times have physical, social, and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food that meets their food preferences and dietary needs for an active and healthy life. This also includes soup kitchens, food banks, school lunch programs, and other programs that give food to people in need without requiring any type of commitment in return. The main threats to food security are world population growth, the increased demand for food, food prices, as we're seeing today, the disappearance of different varieties of agricultural plant species, water scarcity, and the limitation of available land, food losses, and food waste. How does food waste affect food security? Well, I'm going to use an example here from my own fridge, my own example of food waste. I've done lots of it myself. So I'm going to use an example of having a head of lettuce. I had a head of lettuce in my fridge, and you know how lettuce gets, it gets brown and kind of limpy, and so I threw it away. And then I went down to the grocery store and bought another head of lettuce because I wanted to have a salad for dinner tonight. So all is good in my world until I start thinking about what I've actually done. By throwing this lettuce into the garbage, not only am I wasting all the energy and costs associated with producing this head of lettuce, I'm helping to fuel increased demand for more lettuce because I still want the lettuce to replace that which I threw away. It also makes it so that less food is going to those countries where poverty is an issue, because more food is being funneled through the wealthier countries, which can afford to buy excess food. So if food is lost, food lost or wasted,
Yeah, I'll stop this.
all the resources used to grow that food, the soil, the water, the fertilizers, the labor, the packaging, the transportation are also wasted with huge environmental costs. We will then have to grow or import more food, which directly affects our food security and our ability to feed our nation. If I would not have wasted maybe that one head of lettuce, perhaps a whole chain of events may have been lessened or maybe not have happened at all. And we also have to remember that food waste is a huge emitter of methane in the dumps, adding to the worsening effects of climate change. Methane is a far more destructive gas on climate change than carbon dioxide. And climate change is proving to be a major player in food security, with fires, floods, droughts, all impacting food production. So just going to read you some stats next. They're always nice to see, I think, and that way we get a clear idea of where the world's at and where Canada's at. According to the UN, each year, an estimated 1/3 of all food produced, equivalent to about 1.3 billion tons, worth about $1 trillion, ends up rotting in the bins of consumers and retailers, or spoiling due to poor transportation and harvesting practices. Globally, 1 in 9 people goes to bed hungry. And according to food waste stats worldwide, 1 in 9 people are undernourished. The total number of people who do not have enough food is 925 million people. If we could save 1/4 of the food we waste, it would be enough to feed 870 million people. On the 2019 report from Environment and Climate Change Canada, the United Nations Environment Program found that Canadians waste 79 kilograms of household food per capita per year, for a total of 2.94 million metric tons per year. In 2017, the National Zero Waste Council conducted research on household food waste in Canada, and the results were astonishing. 63% of the food Canadians throw away could have been eaten. For the average Canadian household, that amounts to 140 kilograms of wasted food per year at a cost of more than $1,100 per year. For Canada as a whole, that amounts to almost 2.2 million tons of edible food wasted each year, costing Canadians in excess of $17 billion. All types of food are wasted, but in Canada, the most predominantly wasted foods by weight are vegetables, 30%, fruit, 15%, leftovers, 13%, bread and bakery, 9%, dairy and eggs, 7%. To put that in perspective, every day in Canada, we waste, and this was shocking to me, 470,000 heads of lettuce, 1.2 million tomatoes, 2,400,000 potatoes, 750,000 loaves of bread, 1,225,000 apples, 555,000 bananas, 1 million cups of milk, and 450,000 eggs. Those numbers are shocking. And when we put them together, we can really see how the waste can add up. So just like my story of my one little lettuce, it made part of that 470,000 heads of lettuce. We can help to reverse these numbers by recognizing food waste in our own homes, in our communities, and in our country. By educating ourselves and others, we can learn to consume in a way that preserves our natural resources. Many of us are aware that we waste food, but very few of us realize just how much we waste. Food is something that we need to value and not take for granted. Without understanding what food you waste, it is hard to make the right changes. So I'm hoping today that we can get a better understanding of the cost of food waste and how it's impacting us. We can maybe learn many lessons from our great-grandparents' generation, including how to make no waste cool again. I'm leaving this part of that with a good quote from Tristan Stewart, an English author and environmentalist. Cutting food waste is a delicious way of saving money, helping to feed the world and protect the planet. We have a short video to watch at this point. It's called The Food Waste Problem.
The world produces enough food to feed every single human being, but in the same world, almost 815 million people are suffering from hunger. Why is this the case? Food waste is a big reason. Statistics show that every year we waste nearly 1.6 billion tons of food. That's worth $1.2 trillion.
The average American family spends $2,000 on food that it doesn't eat. $2,000 on food that it doesn't eat. There is waste at the farm, in transit, at supermarkets and restaurants, at homes. It's everywhere.
Experts believe reversing this trend would provide enough food to feed 2 billion people. Reducing food waste could also have a positive impact on climate change, because when food is wasted, so are the natural resources used to grow food, such as water, land, and fertilizer.
But what we have to recognize now is that we are reaching the ecological limits that our planet can bear. And when we chop down forests, as we are every day, to grow more and more food, when we extract water from depleting water reserves, when we emit fossil fuel emissions in the quest to grow more and more food, and then we will throw away so much of it, we have to think about what we can start saving.
To address the issue, the UN aims to halve food waste by 2030, but it seems unlikely it'll reach the goal unless governments, companies, and consumers take immediate action. There are a number of measures that can help, such as providing storage methods, launching consumer awareness campaigns, and changing consumer behaviour, along with assuring better food policies. So will Earthlings finally do what it takes to curb food waste for the welfare of the planet?
So we're going to discuss right now what several different countries are trying to do to help with food waste and responsible consumption, and also what Canada is doing. First, to talk about this is Colleen Hooper. She's the FWIC director from BC.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself again. Well, I have to say that a lot has been covered from the notes I've got, and so I'll just sort of fill in and do some interesting, I hope, things. Spain has had a food security program since 2011. They also are doing the UN program, and hopefully will get with their recycling. They've established a 300 million euro fund targeting rural poverty and food security, which is the ruralness of Spain is a problem. The International Fund of Agricultural Development, IFAD, worked with poor rural people to enable them to grow and sell more food, increase their incomes, and determine the direction of their own lives. Spain's contribution will ensure immediate and reliable resources that will enhance IFAD's ability to reduce rural poverty and create income opportunities for smallholder farms. My daughter lives in Santiago de Compostela in Spain, and I asked her how Spain was doing. Well, about 8 years ago, maybe longer, there was a bank collapse, and many people were living in poverty. And they moved to larger cities looking for a way for a better life. Many small towns were left empty, and the agricultural activity was gone. And I've hiked through Spain, and we went through empty cities after empty cities because people had just moved to the cities that were larger and they could get more work. Andrea works at a vegan restaurant and lives in the old town part of Santiago. There is a garbage collection, but in that area, there isn't a recycle program of any kind, which I thought was kind of interesting. They have access to larger bins, garbage bins, and every evening the bins are rolled out and out out to the main street so they could get them, because the streets are so narrow, the garbage trucks can't get into those narrow streets. And so that's about it with their garbage. So they're just taking it and, as far as I know, dumping it. I was having trouble finding some information for the simple reason that it was in Spanish and not English, and I couldn't translate it or make sense of it. So she said that even being in the restaurant, there is no program for them, and there's no, for the amount of waste that comes from the restaurant, it isn't recycled in any manner. So, and if I could go on to Taiwan after this, I just have a little bit on Taiwan because I've been to Taiwan, and in the large, due to the large population growth, there was a huge rat problem and very large cockroaches, I have to admit, because everybody left their garbage for the weekly pickup, and they left it in the street. And to eradicate this problem, they developed a daily program of garbage pickup, which I thought was sort of fun, but for domestic homes, no garbage cans are allowed to be left in the streets, none. You don't see any garbage anywhere on the streets. The garbage trucks play music like the 1812 Overture and Vivaldi's Rite of Spring, and they come around, and they come around in tubes. So the one truck picks up the garbage, the food stuff, and then the other one picks up and sorts in the truck at the same time. They sort the garbage for bottles and cardboard and whatever. And the food scraps go to pigs and composting. And the plastic, glass, cardboard, etc., is sent to appropriate places. But I'm not sure exactly where it goes. I do know they have polar fleece companies there that are factories that are making polar fleece, and they make the polar fleece from the plastic bottles, and it has been that way since the beginning of when they started first making polar fleece. It was all made out of plastic bottles. It was an idea to do something about. So so it solved the rat problem, it solved the garbage problem, but it didn't solve the cockroaches. They're still there. And that's it for me.
Next, we will have Judy Page Jones. She's an FWIC director from Quebec.
Unmuted, sorry, I thought I unmuted now. Switzerland, food security. Switzerland is a well-off country with a high standard of living and low poverty rate. While poverty does exist within the country, food security has not been a problem due to strong welfare programs. Although Switzerland takes care of the issue, the government takes seriously with the increase of population, climate change, and unstable European markets. The government uses new technologies such as satellite data with radar technology to establish crop forecasting and agriculture microinsurance. Among other things, crop forecasts enable the early detection of food crises, enabling timely intervention to prevent food emergencies and famine. In partnership with the private sector, the Swiss government develops microinsurance products for farmers for insurances, for example, against drought and flooding. This is important to prevent more people from falling into poverty. Food waste. The food waste management in Switzerland is based on the polluter pays principle. Bin bags are taxed with a pay per bag fees in 3/4 of the communities. This recycling rate doubled in 20 years due to this strategy. The recycling rate is over 50% now. All unsorted trash does not go into landfills, but it goes into incinerators for energy recovery. In fact, around 3% of electricity used in Switzerland is produced this way. Although Switzerland has a high recycling rate, they are one of the highest producers of food waste in Europe. In Switzerland, about 2.6 million tons of food waste is generated annually. At least 2/3 of this is avoidable, the same as what Brenda said. I mean, the food is edible when it's discarded or is edible at some point prior to disposal. The main reasons for the high level of avoidable household food waste are general lack of awareness of the waste generated and insufficient knowledge about shelf life, storage, and as well as ways to use of leftover food. Like it's pretty well all over, it's the same way. The Swiss scientists are working on better ways of packaging food for the consumers to be aware of expiration dates on perishables. One way they're trying to develop is a special label that consumers would see on a small square on the packaging that would change color to indicate freshness. This could look like a traffic light where a green label means food is fresh and the red label means that the product is no longer safe to eat. But that's in the works, they say. And that was Switzerland. And now back to Brenda DeVoe for France.
Okay, thank you. So how does France deal with food waste? In February 2016, France adopted a law on fighting food waste that meant supermarkets were forbidden to destroy unsold food products and were compelled to donate it instead. According to French regulation, large supermarkets are no longer allowed to throw away good quality food approaching its best before date. This law constituted the starting point of the fight against food waste through banning its destruction and facilitating donation. This law requires that any store larger than 4,305 square feet to sign donation contracts with not-for-profit organizations. Failure to do so could result in fines up to 75,000 euros or 2 years of imprisonment. It makes it easier and faster for the retail industry to give their surplus produce directly to charities and food banks. The French Federation of Food Banks agrees the law is working. It's a major middleman in the grocery store to charity food chain. Every morning, more than 2,700 supermarkets send nearly out-of-date food to nearly 80 warehouses across the country, rescuing 46,000 tons a year that would otherwise be thrown away. Donations to food banks are up more than 20%, according to the government. Some will use the food to prepare meals, 226 million a year, according to the food bank. Others, like the Salvation Army, sort and distribute the donated food directly to the needy. Across France, 5,000 charities depend on the food bank network, which now gets nearly half its donations from grocery stores. This new law has increased the quantity and quality of donations. There are more fresh foods and products available further from their expiration date. The law also helps cut back on food waste by getting rid of certain constraining contracts between supermarkets and food manufacturers. Not only has this improved the food waste in France, but it also has encouraged the development of a whole ecosystem of businesses that are helping grocery stores better manage their stocks and reduce food waste. The law has spawned many local partnerships between supermarkets and food assistance organizations. This has also encouraged other regulations, such as recycling initiatives and consumer waste programs. France wants to be a leader, a world leader in sustainability by 2025. Okay, and we are back to Colleen Hooper again on Canada.
Well, Canada, I think Carla and Brenda right at the beginning have covered quite a bit of what I had written for Canada. But Canada introduced in 2019 promised alignment with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and such as zero hunger, good health and well-being, responsible production and consumption, and climate action. And as it stands, Canada is still not on track. And I was going to ask Carla about this question after, but by what I've found is that they're not on track for 2030 and need to work hard to get there. The underlying cause of much household food insecurity is financial constraints, not having enough money to pay for food. Although 2/3 of our food insecure households in Canada are low wages salaries, households of self-employed, including part-time workers and precarious employment, are also a problem. It has a negative impact physically, mentally, and socially. And I do believe through the COVID, it really has had its mental impact on people. And it costs to our health system. And the statistics I had were that 1 out of 8 households in Canada is food insecure, meaning their food waste is extremely high. And 4.4 million people, including 1.2 million children, live in food insecure households. And what affects this insecurity is climate change has a huge impact. Heat waves and extreme weather, air pollution, droughts, and floods. And I'm sure everybody knows that in the Fraser Valley here, that the flooding will have a huge impact for the food sources in the future that they produced, but won't be for a few years now. The extreme weather that was experienced creates new agricultural diseases and air pollution caused by burning coal, oil, and natural gas. We will need to learn to adapt to a hotter climate. Rising population and the ensuing housing being built, especially on farmland, is destroying the land forever and having it not be a farm again. No farmland, no food. COVID is another factor. Loss of workers, unable to bring things across the border, like we have, although we have our own produce and that, a lot of it does come across our border. Fresh water. Canada has one of the largest renewable resources of fresh water in the world. Upwards of 20% of the world's surface fresh water is here in Canada, and BC has 9.5 of that surface water. We still need to address, though, the lack of safe water storage, old pipes for water treatment systems, poor sanitation infrastructure, agricultural runoff, chemical pollutants, human or animal waste, weather-related events, the same, such as flooding and drought. And on sustainability, all of these facts on Canada, I honestly was saying, we were talking about it last night, but I honestly don't think of Canada as being low on producing great products and being high in having that ability to have the food in our houses. But evidently we're not up there with yet. And the sustainability, Brenda had a great article in the WI Connections on sustainability. And we talked again about sustainability and number 12 from the UN. What can Canadians do to manage household food security? Education. And that's where I believe WI comes in, is a great factor in adapting to our climate change, cut food waste, learning to do things at home instead of going out for restaurants, learning to look after our natural resources, and no waste land and water, as well as air pollution from greenhouse gases and other toxic emissions are all our cause and hopefully can be rectified soon. And that's all I have on Canada. Thank you.
Thank you, Colleen. Next, we have Susan Hozowski. She's a BCWI member, and she's going to be talking about Fernie, BC.
Thank you, Brenda.
You're welcome.
Can everybody hear me?
Mhm.
Today I would like to just share with everyone about what a small community is doing. Fernie, BC. Lynn has the map up there. We're over here in the southeast corner. And Fernie is approximately 70 kilometers from where I live. But the city of Fernie has embraced the Love Food, Hate Waste program, which is a national program to reduce food waste in Canada. And it aims to change Canadians' behaviors around food and dramatically reduce the amount of food wasted across the country every day. Canadians throw out more food than we realize. Some of the food waste is unavoidable, like bones, peelings, eggshells, tea bags, coffee grounds. But Fernie has really embraced the program, and they opened up a store called The Local. It's a food-based social enterprise built by Wild Site Elk Valley volunteers. And they're really promoting locally grown and foods. And they do have to, at certain times of the year, purchase foods from probably as far away as about 200 miles away. But they're trying to really stay with the 100-mile diet and the Buy BC. So it has its own store, which supports producers and celebrates local food and brings the supply chain closer to the consumer. They aimed high in their first year, and they did hit their target. And that was by, that they started out with 17 local little producers supplying their store. And by the end of the first year, they had over 50 local producers. And the local store is like shopping at a farmer's market. And they really, their slogan is, you come, you see what's good, plan your meals around what's available. They're really proving or showing to consumers that not all foods are available year round, such as spring onions aren't in the store all year, and nor are tomatoes. The first year, the community has really embraced the store, and they have 600 monthly customers, returning customers. They come to the local store first to get their veggies, their eggs, their meats for the week, and then they will go elsewhere, like to the larger stores, to fill in. But they promote that you're getting your basic food items from your neighbors. Your food is fresher, it tastes better, and it's reducing the environmental impact. Their shelves, fridges, and freezers are fully stocked with high quality meats, pre-made meals, jams, jellies, preserves, and all kinds of fresh produce that, well, mind you, it's in coolers, but they have it. And it's a model that puts the profits back into the pockets of the producers. And in their first year, the store paid back to the producer $179,000 to the local businesses. And before that, 99% of Fernie's commercially available food is imported. They have one road in and one road out. Highway 93 runs through the town. So it made the region very vulnerable to supply shortages. Their plan and their vision proved valuable this fall with the Fraser Valley flooding. Much of BC feared for food security, but the local store's supply was largely unaffected. In the first year, the local has sold more than 20,400 eggs, 2,515 pounds of locally grown apples, and recovered 109 pounds of rhubarb from local gardens. It aims to increase year-round access of locally grown food and cultivate a thriving, knowledgeable local food culture, and reduce the length of the supply chain that feeds the Elk Valley. And Fernie is a small community of about 6,000 people. It grows in the winter, of course, because it's known for its ski hill and this sort of thing. So I just wanted to share that with everyone, that it's a very, very nice program. And the store is beautifully set up and everything. So that's it for me. So back to you, Brenda. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Susan. That was really interesting. I'm going to have to make a note if I'm ever down that way to go check out that store and go look myself.
Oh, it's wonderful. Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to have a video again now. It's about, I think this is about a 5-minute video, so I hope you enjoy.
It's going to take a while to heat up.
Chef Jagger Gordon hates the thought of people going hungry.
Smells delicious.
With a thriving catering business, he's almost always surrounded by food. So he was shocked years ago when his young daughter came home from a sleepover and told him there had been no breakfast for anyone.
I always thought there was enough food for everyone. Why would someone not have food in their fridge in the morning?
The realization that poverty and hunger were so close to home, while also seeing the incredible amount of food that goes to waste in his industry, turned this caterer into a crusader.
We are feeding thousands of people a week and diverting tens of thousands of pounds a week of perfectly edible food that's in the landfills.
His mission is to feed it forward with a number of projects like this grocery store. The food here is practically free.
And people just pay what they can?
Yeah, it's more like donate what you can.
The workers are volunteers, the food donated by retailers. Looks perfect, but it didn't sell fast enough and is no longer considered fresh enough for fussy consumers.
This would have been sold somewhere else, most of this stuff?
So this was for sale everywhere. This is rescued. All this food and everything that I deal with is rescue food.
Rescued from the garbage heap. $31 billion worth a year, just in Canada. Food goes to waste on the farm, in transit, in processing plants, in restaurants, and in our homes. Now, that's changing.
Last 20 years, our team has been focused on extracting waste from the supply chain.
Efficiency expert Martin Gooch did the research that came up with that $31 billion figure.
And this project is the first of its type in the world.
Today, he's telling a group of farmers about his newest project that will highlight where exactly waste occurs and how much it costs business.
We have this perception of affluence and abundance. We can afford, most of us can afford to waste some food, whether we're an individual consumer or whether we're a business. Hi, Laurie.
Hi, nice to see you.
His project is being funded by Second Harvest, a social agency that distributed over 10 million pounds of surplus food last year.
We know that there is so much more food that we're not accessing. And that's one of the reasons we're doing this research, is to find out, okay, where is this food?
Every morning, a team delivers truckloads of unsold food donated by big grocers.
But what we found was there was a lot of places that were smaller in scale that we weren't going to pick up from because we wouldn't send a truck there. It just wasn't efficient. So we created something called foodrescue.ca. It's a web-based platform. I kind of call it the eHarmony of food.
The site matches smaller donors and those in need. A great idea, but still, as a society, we toss far too much food, and that contributes to global warming. Rotting food creates methane, a pollutant even worse than carbon dioxide. That's what inspired this young company.
So this is the regular box that gets delivered weekly in Toronto and London. It has basically produce that farmers can't sell to grocery stores, and they usually end up throwing away in the garbage.
Cedric Samaha is with Flash Food, a startup that offers home delivery of less than perfect vegetables, rejected by grocers.
For example, this potato It's disfigured.
I feel like I've bought potatoes like that at the store before. That's not that radical.
Yeah, most of them don't have a lot of issues. Like the cucumber, the size sometimes is an issue, so they won't send it through.
That looks perfect too.
Yeah.
Flash food is growing thanks to demand from customers like John Griffiths and Michelle Clark.
Having a box delivered which is food that would normally go to waste because it doesn't look perfect is great.
The service doesn't save them any money, but the home delivery is convenient and they believe less waste will slow climate change.
This summer's been so hot that it's going to get worse.
Back with chef Jagger Gordon, he's taking his Feed It Forward idea to a new level. He's come up with an app that will allow anyone to share their extra food.
You just take a picture of the product that you want to donate, any food item that's still edible in good standing. So a piece of pizza or even a truckload of tomatoes, you just take a picture of it.
It uploads to a map so that whoever wants it can come get it.
But the great thing is every city can now be in competition of who is saving how much food from the landfills and how much food is actually being given back to people in need.
So you're going to try and start that competition?
It's starting.
The app launches into the marketplace next month, and many would say none too soon. It's time to get on board what's being called a global food waste revolution. Diane Buckner, CBC News, Toronto.
Europe has been ahead of the game when it comes to legislation around
So what can we do as individuals and WI members to help reduce food waste? Shop smart, make shopping lists, try not to buy on impulse. Research has shown that buying bulk and items on sale leads to more food waste. If you're not using up your dairy items, buy them in smaller amounts. Or people freeze dairy too. You can freeze butter, you can freeze milk. It may not unthaw quite as nice, but you can still usable. Use up your produce before you buy more. Store produce properly. You can take back to that lettuce again. You know, I've taken lettuce before now that's not as perfect as I want it, and I chop it up and I put it in soups and I put it in stews, and it's just fine. It's a nice addition to all that sort of stuff. Freeze foods such as brown rice, nuts, oatmeal. This will prevent them from going rancid, so that if you store them in your pantry or your cupboards for a long time, then you go to use them and you smell them and they smell off. They're rancid. So if you freeze them, you add probably years to their shelf life. I freeze all that sort of food. Greens that you have left can also be frozen, and you can use them up like in soups and stews and smoothies. Store food correctly. Put the newest items behind the older ones, so the older ones get used first. Learn to preserve, like many of us do. Grow a garden. Canning, pickling, freezing, curing, fermenting, all are processes that reduce waste and make food last longer. Be less fussy. You know, the food we eat doesn't have to be blemish free. If you have an apple tree in your yard and the fruit is fabulous, but it's certainly not blemish free, but we still eat it and it tastes great. According to Health Canada, the best before dates are actually more of a suggestion than a guideline. The food may have lost some of its taste and texture by those dates, but it's been shown that most foods are still good to eat after the best before dates. These are not truly indicative of when most food should be eaten by. If you have canned peaches or something like that, you probably know that, because we can peaches and then for the first, a year or something, or 6 months, they're this really nice golden color, but then they sort of fade a bit in the jars, but they're still perfectly fine when you open them and eat them. Eat leftovers or freeze them for later. When eating at restaurants, share meals, especially if the portions are too large, or take the leftovers home. Facilitate discussion at your WI local meetings or AGMs. Talk with each other about what you can do, what you are doing. Get some speakers in. Keep the interest and awareness going. Education and awareness are the key. Download and use food sharing apps. I don't have this, but this is something new, but I think a lot of people do use these. You can download apps to donate your leftover food and decrease the amount of food you waste. One app is called Too Good to Go, and it's the world's #1 app for fighting food waste. It's that you buy and collect food so that it does not get thrown away. Advocate for corporate responsibility. Join petitions and campaigns calling out businesses with unsustainable practices. Put forth resolutions that help to put pressure on the governments to bring about change. Diverting food waste to composting is better than sending it to the landfill. So we should all compost if we can, but preventing food from being wasted in the first place is an even better way to lessen our impact on the environment. That is our presentation for this evening. I hope that you found it enlightening and interesting. And I think we are opening up now for discussion and questions.
Carla, did you want to add anything at this point?
I think there was one question around kind of how we're tracking towards goals, like with the broader sustainable development goals. I can just basically flag that we are, the government has hosted, I would say, 8 member state dialogues as a result of a United Nations Food Systems Summit that was held. And had like diverse participation across the food system. And one of the big purposes of those dialogues was to inform the development of a pathways, Canada's national pathways document. And Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada is the lead department for drafting that document. And that document is actually intended to outline commitments and actions towards SD goals. So I think that's going to be a bit of a guidepost for measuring towards 2030. And at some point soon, I think that will be available for consultation. And then I just think, generally speaking, like it was great to be part of this and just to hear kind of the varied perspectives. And I do think it will take everybody to kind of, it's a big challenge, food waste and food security, and certainly governments are working hard. And I think it will include all of society. So just thanks so much for allowing me to be part of it. But nothing further to add other than that.
Thank you, Carla. Brenda, I'm going to turn this back to you. I just wanted to see if Carla had anything else she wanted to add.
Okay, well, I have nothing else to add. I'm just reading some notes on the side here. Okay, I don't know who this is from, but the #1 reason we throw away food is that we can afford it and we are not hungry. Food is cheap in Canada compared to the other parts of the world. Well, that's true. Are we not hungry when we're eating? And food is cheap, I guess, compared to other parts of the world. And that's really all I see. I don't see any other comments or questions.
May I make a verbal one comment?
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes when we're talking, because we can afford it, of late with the rising cost of fuel, even for home fuel, and you're paying 10 cents on every liter for a carbon tax plus HST. When you're filling that oil tank now, there's starting to be a very high percentage on tax. And when we look at the shelves in the store, the price of food is going up, and we're saying it has to do with delivery, it has to do with supply, it has to do. But doesn't it also have to do with the fact that we have such large corporations that really control and provide the majority of our food source, like who owns Loblaws, who owns this? Like a lot of the stores are owned by one person and one company. And so the cost of food on the shelf now is starting to be a concern for a lot of young families that do their own cooking. And in our family, we have a garden. I preserve, we freeze, we source out food. We're both retired. We're lucky. We source out food in smaller communities that have maybe a butcher shop, and the food, the meat and that you're buying, you're paying sometimes a little more, but you're getting, you know, a very good cut of meat. You can stretch it a little further, etc. But when I go to the grocery store and I look and I say, I wonder really, is the cost of the food on the shelf because there's no competition there? There's little competition, and so you can charge your $2.49 or your $3.25 for your cucumber, etc. And even in season, some stores you go into, you're still paying a phenomenal price for that pepper on the counter when it's in season and peppers are coming out wherever, you know. So I don't know, when I say affordability of food and insecurity of food, there's a lot of insecurity of food because they just can't afford to pay what's on the shelf. I don't think in a country like Canada, a family should have to resort to going to a food bank to be able to get their food, when I think our government should be looking at what the actual pricing of food is on the shelf. And why is it that price? Is because there's lack of competition? And that's what my question would be when we're looking at affordability of food, is we have to look a little further as to why it's so expensive on the shelf year round.
Good question. Good questions, Pam. I don't know. I wouldn't know who the big wholesalers are or the main growers are of food in Canada. But I do know from reading that I've done that a lot of food is funneled through the wealthier countries because we can afford it. And so, you know, whether that makes the prices set, I don't know. That would be a good thing to look into, though, for sure.
Thank you.
This is Linda Mason from Alberta. My daughter lives in Calgary, and I do know that in her area anyhow, but I think it's all throughout Calgary, that they do have to separate their food waste, their cardboard, and their paper material. So Calgary is trying to do something about this, and I'm hoping that more of the larger cities are also doing that. I would think if Calgary is, a lot of the other ones are. I am an entrepreneur, so I grow my own food and I share it with my neighbors and my friends and whoever needs it. I do sell all of my that I make at farmers markets, which is sort of like the Fernie. There is fresh vegetables, fruits, which I also supply there too at the markets, as well as the canning and so on and so forth. I do compost all of the waste materials that is not inedible, and it goes back into my garden in order to raise all of the foods that I grow. I even use the eggshells and the coffee grounds and the tea bags and the fruit peelings in my compost. So I do my part, and I like to share with everybody else how to do it and when to do it and why we are doing it. I think all of us need to do all of that. Just a little blurb from my corner of Alberta.
Okay. Thank you, Linda. That was well said. I'm just reading the chats here. It says, do a lot of cities and provinces compost? I know that our small little town here does not compost, but I know that Prince George, which I live close to, does compost, and you can actually go there and buy the soil once it's been composted after, you know, certain years and that. But I don't know if that's a regular thing throughout Canada and the other provinces. I don't know. Does anybody else here know?
In Quebec, there's a lot of composting. We have the brown bins everywhere now. And I know in this area anyway, the MRC, we can go get the compost dirt free too. And it's, although at home here, I compost as Linda does for my own garden, but anything that can't go in my, like the paper paper napkins, towels like that, they can go into the brown bin.
Right.
And we have it, the brown bin here is once a week, I think. So I think most of Quebec has the brown bins now, I think.
Okay, well, that's good to know.
In the Niagara region in Ontario, we do recycling and we do composting as well.
Oh, okay.
Prince Edward Island has Waste Watch, and we compost, we separate plastics, we separate cardboard, and it's done province-wide and collected.
Okay, good to
It's
know.
the same here, that in BC, we compost and separate our recyclables. So it's the same as quite a few other provinces. But I think sometimes what happens is they run into regulations, like government regulations or provincial ones, that you can't, when we were having conventions and that, you can't take food away from there or give food from there to a senior's home or something like that. You can't do stuff like that. And perhaps now they're being more lax with the regulations, but a lot of it was that you couldn't use that again, and it could only go to the composting. It couldn't. And then too, I think COVID has had a huge impact on what we're sending on to other people, and perhaps it'll settle back down again now that that COVID's low for now. But I do think that it has to do with how we're all regulated to do things.
Oh, Brenda. Okay, who's going to go? Barbara, you're going to go?
Yeah, in my region of Ontario does separate with the composting and that, but I'm in Durham region, just outside of Toronto. And if you don't use your green bin, you get a visit from the region to explain why you aren't. Because I wasn't using mine because I have a composter in the backyard. So over the summer, I was using it. And so I hadn't used it for several months, and I got a call from the region. Why wasn't I using my green bin?
A good reminder. In Nova Scotia, we're the same as Prince Edward Island. We have a province-wide system to collect for sorting, for paper, for plastics, for glass, and for compost. So ours is a green bin, Judy, not a brown bin. Ours is green. And same thing though. And but I guess what I was reminded of is that probably, I want to say 40 years ago, in Nova Scotia, it was Women's Institute members that said we need to start doing some recycling, and we would take our bags of plastics and paper down to the drop-off place at the community hall, and a truck would come and pick it up, and then they would take it off and do what they needed to do with it properly. And that's what we have to do with food waste too. We have to figure out a way, how do we get this back down to the members to have them to be educated? I think there was a lot of really good information given this evening that we can share, that we can figure out, do we need a resolution on this? And it's not about what the government can do, it's what can we do as individuals and as a Women's Institute organization to help support. We know this goal, goal 12 for the United Nations is what we need to do. And so how can we as individuals in our own communities make a difference? That's what we're knowing for. And this is, I think, a good opportunity to do that. So
that's a great suggestion, Lynn. It's so true. Yeah.
Right on, Lynn.
Also on Prince Edward Island, as they pick up the bins, they're checked. So if there's something in the compost bin that doesn't go, we have to take the bin back and redo it.
Lynn, if I might speak to Manitoba, we have quite a mixture in Manitoba of available services for recycling. Some places will have bins for composting, others will not. Some places people are separating their recyclables only to find that when the garbage is being picked up, everything's being mixed together. So it's kind of a hit and miss. It's something that most communities are really looking at fixing. But one of the things we did with WI this year is we had an evening where people came together on Zoom to offer household tips on food. Things that would just give you a little bit more of a lifespan for, let's say, your celery or your berries. And we found that it was incredible, the tips that people had. And I know for myself, I now wrap all of my lettuce and all of my green onions in tin foil. And I have increased their lifespan by 2 weeks at least. So now instead of rushing, chopping and freezing the darn celery that's starting to turn on the edges, I get an extra 2 weeks out of them. The berries, by putting them in just a plain old jar that you get from either jam or whatever kind of sauce you were too lazy to cook the night before, which sometimes when I was working was a little more often than we'd have liked. The berries now will stay easily up to 2 weeks. And to keep raspberries over a week in our house was incredible. So I hear what everybody's saying tonight, but I think we need to take this presentation and offer some tangible hints so that we don't just have the philosophy, we have the how-to, because that's what people need, is the how-to, in my opinion. Thanks.
Yeah, I was just thinking too that could we do up a booklet of how
Did you
to
have breakfast, supper?
To use leftovers, or I mean, like,
Is
you know,
it
instead of
busy
throwing
down
out.
there?
Pardon?
Go ahead, Susan.
Oh,
I have to find her, so.
Oh, okay. No, just do up a booklet of hints or something, how to use up, like instead of throwing out bread, do them up for croutons or bread crumbs for turkey stuffing and that sort of thing.
Could it not be something put into the WI connections?
That would be good, yeah. Yeah.
Maybe
It could be a corner on hints on to pick up to what Deborah was saying, some helpful hints.
Yeah, yeah. You know, with leftover rice, make rice pudding, or yeah.
Fred and Brenda, we remember Joan. She used to take a pineapple and you know how you peel your pineapple, and then she'd take those peels and make it, boil them, and then make it into jam. Because there was enough left over, so it would make a jar jam.
Well, I think it's a great idea to get together some hints and tips, and we're WI people, we know all those things. You know, we just have to have a place for sending them to, and then, like you said, put them in the WI connections or in your newsletters that come out. I had heard a little bit about putting berries in a jar. I've never tried it, but I've heard it's supposed to really keep the shelf life or the fridge life of them. And obviously, I guess it does. So I didn't know that. So I'm going to try that now.
Me too.
Yeah.
I had an, am I mute?
No.
I had an excellent cookbook. If I can find it, many years ago. Now, it mentioned how you could make a really good stock. For a month, you would save all your leftover bits of vegetables and fruits and apple cores and bones and everything. And you would just, and you put in dill, onion, I guess celery, and garlic. And you would just cook you would just let it simmer all day. You drain off the stock and use that as a base for your soups. And my family has good memories of the different soups that you could make.
We should put that in the new in our news.
I'd be happy to.
Send it to Angela.
Okay.
Her address is in the WI connection, so. Or send it to Margaret and I will send it in for you. So one or the other, so.
And sometimes if you throw in the weirdest combination, your family might even like it.
I'm just reading at one of the comments here from Barbara Weiss. She says, many years ago, Manitoba Home Association has a program developed for low literacy consumers. This program had an excellent companion piece that focused on using the not so pretty and or slightly wilted produce. Joan Clement and Gail Watson may still remember this program. Anybody here remember that?
One thing we should remember, that our stomach is not an art gallery.
One time when I was younger and I was cleaning out the fridge, making a stew, and there was some leftover pancakes. And so I added that. Everybody thought it was wonderful that I had made dumplings for the stew.
And did you admit that you made dumplings?
I actually did tell them it was leftover pancakes, but they still were quite happy with it.
Well, I think food storage is definitely something that we could put something together on, but I think I would like to go back to the store shelves again. Why do we have to buy a cucumber, one single cucumber wrapped in plastic? Like they will put out brown bags for the mushrooms. I've learned that when I come home from the store, I take the plastic off the cucumber. I take the plastic off the cucumbers or the mushrooms. I put them in brown paper bags. When we bring our produce in from the garden, even here, we wash, we dry it. I usually leave it sit, and then I will just take a clean tea towel and wrap it loosely and put it in the fridge. And I can keep that lettuce, whether it's when I buy it from the store, I take it home and soak it in cold water and clean it, let it sit in the colander, wrap it in a tea towel. I can keep that head of lettuce for over a week. It's as good as the day I brought it home from the store. So maybe that's something that we could pick a project and do something on storage. But I go back to the store shelves again. Why are we buying a cucumber wrapped in plastic? I don't understand that. Maybe there's a very valid reason, but I don't understand why we have a whole bin with 250 cucumbers all in a single plastic wrap. Somewhere, if we really want to start cutting down on waste, or we want to cut down on the processing and the cost of putting that cucumber on the shelf, we have to say to the person, the processor, if you're using plastic, then it's going to cost you more. You've got to use a more friendly, environmentally way to get that food to the shelf for the people. I think maybe that's an advocacy thing that we could work on as WI. We're knowing for our advocacy. And if we could work with those who know everything around food processing and why it's wrapped, etc. We have agriculture, Agri-Food Canada. We have the Canadian Food Inspection Agency and many other ones. Perhaps we could use their expertise
and then go forward with some advocacy to see a little bit more friendly, environmentally stuff on our shelves.
I agree with that. I agree with the over wrapping of vegetables and fruit. And I think it's actually been worse since we've had this pandemic. It's become more and more. And I don't buy cucumbers that are wrapped in plastic. So I don't eat cucumbers a lot because most of them are wrapped in plastic. Yeah, so I do agree. I did ask once when I was in the grocery store, I did talk to the produce lady there and I said, why are you wrapping everything? And she said, it's because the food lasts longer and it's for disinfectant germs purposes or whatever. But I sometimes think it's just because the plastic companies want to sell more plastic.
Well, don't you think it's the opposite? Because if you left that cucumber in that plastic bag in the fridge, it'll go bad really quickly. So to me, it's the opposite. And to add to that, no, it's only English cucumbers that they do that with. When you get the other cucumbers, you know, like I don't know, like a garden cucumber, they call them, they're not wrapped in plastic.
No,
No, but they're normally waxed. They are often waxed. Like if you call it a field cucumber, at this time of the year when you get a cucumber, it's a field one, it'll probably be waxed. It probably has to do with transportation. But again, I guess we're looking at volumes of food that are coming in, and then we're looking at the waste at the other end. So somewhere can we circumvent that we can. It's the same with, I just recently found at a dollar store, a Betty Crocker, you can buy paper for cheese. It's like a waxed paper, not a parchment, but a paper. And when I bring my cheese home, because I just hate to look in the fridge and see, you know, a cheddar has gone off. We just cut it last week, and this week there's all sorts of mold, everything all over it. I found this paper, and when I come home, I take it out of the plastic, I rewrap it. They even have a little label in it, and I put it in the fridge. Unbelievable. And there used to be a cheese shop just south of Ottawa. It was a British lady that ran it. And when I was working in that area, I would stop in and buy my cheese. And she said, you will never get a piece of cheese from this store in plastic. She said, she used to put it like in, well, I guess it was a specific, not a butcher's paper, but similar to that. And you took it home and you have your, you have your cheese in that. And she said, if you have to put it in a plastic bag, put the whole thing in and leave the bag open. She said, wrapped in paper and put it in the plastic, but leave the open. And she said, it won't go moldy. And when I found this paper, I thought, wow, that is so great. I bought a package and we've been doing that since last summer when I found it. And it's unbelievable how much it saves your cheese. Unbelievable. So again, let's go back to the stores and say how the food is packaging. Is that why it costs so much more for a cucumber because it's individually wrapped? Or can we bring the cost of the food down at the store by saying, have a more friendly and less costly way of transporting and presenting that food for sale?
Mm-hmm. I think that the government right now, the federal government is supposedly, they've been talking about it for a while, putting some kind of laws in for single-use plastic. Have they done that yet, or is that still in the works? But I do not think that grocery stores, they're calling that single-use plastic, although it is, isn't it? You know, it should be part of that, but I don't think it is.
Well, I guess too, like for cheese, it'd be more cost effective to put it in plastic than to do it the old fashioned way where they put it in wax or seal it in with a, you know, a coating like that. So But I mean, we get brie cheese that way. Brie comes like that.
Yeah, it
It's
does.
in paper and it comes with a rind on it. So
That's true. One of the messages here on the side, it says, what chemicals are in the paper? Does it come from China? I don't know.
Referring to the paper that I mentioned for the cheese, possibly, it's actually like a waxed paper. I believe it's made in the USA. It's a Betty Crocker. Maybe it's China, I haven't looked, but it is just like, it'll tell you you can't use it to bake with, etc. I don't believe it's a chemical. It's no different than the butcher paper. Like when we go to the specific butcher shop, if I buy, it doesn't matter what I buy. If I buy stewing meat, if I buy steaks, they wrap it for us. They'll wrap an individual steak, they'll wrap two together, etc. You come home and then I manage it in the freezer just by putting it in the extra large plastic bags, which I don't close, but I all the meat in there. And when you go to get that steak, whether you bought it 4 weeks ago or you bought it a week ago, its shelf life seems to be so much better than when you have, if I put meat in our fridge, which is a fairly new one and efficient, and it's sitting in styrofoam container with plastic over it, I can tell you that after 3 days, I'm saying to my husband, is this good to eat? I put it in the fridge in a butcher wrapped paper, and I can leave it there if I forget, well, we can't eat it, we'll eat it. By Friday, I'm saying, oh, it's perfect. There's no problem. There is such a difference in the quality of your food and how it is wrapped. And I think we have to start saying that should be happening in the stores. The person that's selling, they should be doing that for us, and go from there.
Okay, thank you, Pam. I'm going to just read one more comment here. Sorry to step on your toes there, Brenda, but I think it's just about time for us to wrap it up. But there is an interesting comment in here from Doreen Wall, and it says, do you know that you have to pay taxes if your item is wrapped because the store has performed a service for you? So that's all put into the cost of the goods sold. So I don't know, Lynn, are you able to pull up the slide?
Oh, I'm going to try. It doesn't seem to, it seems to have a mind of its own tonight.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, good.
So first and foremost, I want to thank Brenda DeVald for the amazing job that she's done as chair of this committee, putting all of this together, and all of the people that have put their parts into the presentation. To Executive Director Carla St. Croix, thank you so much. We really appreciate all that the time and the energy that you put into helping us with this roundtable. I do want to thank our president-elect, Lynn McLean. She put all of these slides together for us, and she's an amazing lady. So I thank you very much. So thank you to Brenda DeVald, Colleen Hooper, Judy Page Jones, Susan Hausensky. Did I say that right? Hausowski? Anyway, thank you to those presenters. Thank you to everybody that attended. You are an amazing group of WI ladies. And I think that at some point in time, we'll have to either put some of these questions, some of these comments into the WI connections, or find another way to see what we can do about eliminating food waste. So thank you once again. This is a round of applause for all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night, ladies.